Okay. Hi, hello, good morning. Welcome to the National Museum of Theatre and Dance, and to the last day of this conference. I hope you will all enjoy the days. I'm sure you have some fun today as well. And I'm just saying some words about the museum. The museum was created in 1985, and just for the theater. And in 2015, it was expanded to incorporate the dance collection. So now it's more of a performance of performing arts museum than in its origin. We have a very large collection of objects, from costumes to this is my cage. Models, and but you can see some part of it in actually our permanent exhibition. At 6 o'clock, we'll have a vernissage, the opening of two very beautiful exhibitions. I guess you've just seen at least one that's outside, but the proper moment for seeing the exhibition will be at 6. Just one note about the lunchtime. There will be a lunch here, but for people that will not have lunch here, just take note that the museum will close from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So if you go out the museum, you have to wait at the gate, so you can only enter at 2 p.m. Apart from that, just to note, you're also sitting on museum pieces. These are the chairs from one of the important theaters in Lisbon, which is Teatro da Trindade, and you can ask all the history of Teatro da Trindade to Paula Magalhães. She knows everything about Teatro da Trindade. And it's to my dear friend Paula that I'll give the word now.
Thank you, Nuno. Welcome you all at the last day of this amazing conference at this beautiful place, the National Museum of Theatre and Dance. It's a kind of my second house, I'll say. So I'll spend here many hours researching, so I feel at home. It's my second home, this museum. These days have been days of intense and very productive debate, but it's not over. Today, we'll still have an intense journey with several presentations, an interesting roundtable with Christopher Balmer, Joel Anderson, Maria João Brilhante, and Margarida Medeiros. And at the end of the day, the two exhibitions that Nuno told you about. We'll start with a panel, theatricality of photography. We'll have two speakers at this panel, Maria Meaning, it's with me here, and Isabel Lynch at the Zoom. We'll start with Maria. I'll do a brief presentation. Maria Meaning has been a postdoctoral research associate in art history at the University of Koblenz-Landau since 2020. Before that, she was a postdoctoral research associate in media theory at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. She holds a MA in art history from the University of Vienna and an MA in visual arts from the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. Currently, she's concerned with the history of the arts historical slide lecture. Recently, the article, The Tableau Vivant, Medium of Mimetic Desire, was published in Acta Universitatis Sapientia. And the title of her communication, Posing and Performing the Tableau Vivant as an Intermedial Practice. Maria.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Paula. And first of all, I want to thank the organizers for having me here at this very productive conference. Specializing in media culture of the long 19th century, I will focus on artifacts of the period around 1900, and I must confess that I have been stuck to this era. However, I will sketch historical lines to present artistic and cultural practices that hopefully will contribute to this conference's topic. I start my talk with a painting from the early 20th century. It's showing Franz von Lehnbach, one of the most renowned artists of the era, who executed the piece. It's a self-portrait showing the Munich-based artist together with his family. Lehnbach opted for a landscape format in which he placed a group of 4, Lehnbach himself, his wife, and 2 daughters. The group is set slightly to the left in the tableau. The only male figure, Lehnbach, is cropped. Lehnbach's facial and bodily expression appears tense. However, according to his body posture, he seems to have only just rushed into the picture. Here's why. On the right, you can see the related photo discovered by the German art historian Josef Anton Schmoll, genannt Eisenwert, in the late 1960s, proving the painting's dependency on a photograph. Schmoll's finding marked an initial point for reassessing the critical relationship between photography and painting, a topic that has been broadened since then. Today, I will contribute in particular to the role of the tableau vivant at the intersection between performative practices, photography, and painting. Besides its function as a draft for the easel painting, the photograph of the Lehnbach family offers additional information regarding the environment of an improvised photo studio centered by a white backdrop, presumably a canvas on an easel cloaked by a bed sheet. The group huddles together in front of the white cloth to get into the lens's side. From the right, furniture protrudes into the photo, which serves as seats and storage space. Marion, the older daughter sitting at the front, supports her elbow on something that may be a table. The painter/photographer somehow contrasts the well-staged scenery by leaning down to his sitting family. The situation depicted here might be familiar to anyone who ever managed to operate a self-timer in his life. The dual function of acting as the model and the photographer at the same time. In Lehnbach's case, his gesture and facial expression show some inattention as he's concerned with taking the picture. A blog post on the official website of the Lehnbach House even argues the artist's hand, here in the picture, is holding and hiding a remote control. Although pneumatic releases had already existed in the late 19th century, such devices were meant to control the exposure time, but were far too short to serve as a remote control release we have in mind today. Cable releases became common only later in the 20th century. It is therefore more likely that Lehnbach used a product available around 1900, for instance, the Autofotograph, a clockwork device that could be applied directly to the camera and was produced by Hake and Albers in Frankfurt am Main. The device allowed one, quote, to photograph oneself without outside help, end of quote. In 1903, the Heinrich Ernemann Company from Dresden started marketing Autobob, a more complex device that provided an advanced mechanism for self-photography and controlled time recording, which also had to be attached to the apparatus. We can therefore conclude that the painter arranged the scenery from behind the camera, where he activated the self-timer and hurried into the picture. Technology thus affects the individual's acting in front of the apparatus and contributes to aesthetics and particular conventions. A similar example from contemporary digital culture would be the arm often displayed in selfies or selfie culture. And yesterday we also tackled such topics. The photograph shows the effects of vignetting. While blurred in the periphery, the picture is very sharp. where the center of the lens is. In a painting, Lenbach picked this effect and translated it into another medium by using rapid brush strokes and sparse colors applied translucently to indicate the spatial environment by neglecting all the details he declares unnecessary. The rough brushwork continues in the cloth, where the colors become opaque if you look at the blackened parts of Lenbach's jacket, for instance, or the scarlet of Marion's dress that forms the center of visual attraction here. Lenbach seems to have put the most effort into executing the faces. Background, clothing, and bodies even blur, while the artist directs his photos to the portraits. The example illustrates how aesthetic principles derived from photography migrate into painting. Unlike Henry Fox Talbot, who had declared photography as the pencil of nature in 1844, critics dismissed photography as unartistic due to its abundance of visual information. Art theorists of the 19th century argued that only the artist's eye would be capable to distinguish the important from the unimportant, whereas photography could only record reality. Hence, movements such as pictorialism revised the medium's accuracy by applying painterly qualities to the photographs. Looking at the family portrait in detail, we can observe, and I'm actually not sure if you can see it on the projection now. But we can observe preparatory lines traced from the photographic model, for instance, at Lenbach's ear. If we draw our attention to one of Lenbach's Munich fellows, Franz von Stuck, a number of artifacts have survived from his workshop. Like in Lenbach's case, those photographs prove a close connection between photographic practice, drawing, and painting. It was Franz von Stuck's wife, Mary, who presumably ran a photo studio in the basement of his villa in Munich that contributed massively to the workshop's activities. The photographs show a wide range of motion to nude studies that serve as drafts for paintings. The prints were collected in albums, and wide and large-scale prints served as the basis for pictures in the studio. Whereas the first group of artifacts provides some insight into the interaction of the model and the photographer, the latter bears tracing marks. On the left, I'm showing you a portrait of Stuck's daughter Mary with a black hat. And as you can recognize, Stuck used those prints as visual aids to transfer the outlines to a sketch and eventually on the canvas. And here you can see those lines. By looking at the painting again, we can observe that the contours have disappeared under the paint, so compared to Lenbach, and therefore photography becomes hidden here. However, the painterly principle of focusing attention on the faces of the protagonists, both the daughter and the dog, remains the same. If you will, the artist's eye and hand replace the camera's lens by following some principles of optics. Within the preserved photographic collection from the workshop, the Stuck family and several models appear in historical costumes that refer to epochs or masterpieces in the sense of the tableau vivant. Although I won't be able to sketch the history of living images today, let me point to the educative aspects of this performative practice regarding connoisseurship and the formation of art historical knowledge, a fact that the German scholar Birgit Joos has underpinned in her study. Challenging the audience to recognize cited artworks and or challenging the performers to imitate poses are the two critical factors of the tableau vivant practice around 1800 that were set into force and remained intact throughout the 19th and early 20th century. The tableau vivant practice also formed the core of the festive culture of the 19th century, namely the German Künstlerfest tradition, which again interfered strongly with photography. Those artists' feasts had the character of costume balls that focused on various kinds of topics, featuring the works of single artists or even whole epochs. In Arcadia was the title of such a costume ball, taking place in 1898, referring to antiquity. Both organizers and participants spent great efforts to realize those festivities. A series of photographs show Franz von Stuck and his wife Mary, who visited the ball dressed up as a Roman couple. The example you can see here on a slide is executed as a cabinet card, a collectible with gilded edges that could be circulated among clients and friends. What strikes is a huge amount of white space on the photograph. Only a locket-like circular section shows Mary and Franz Stuck in profile, a form of representation derived from ancient coins and other artifacts. Living images appear in a wide range of variations. In a stricter sense, the poses would even be staged behind a stretched ghost in a picture frame, a setting that worked as a semi-translucent canvas. Photography contributed massively to the opportunities of the tableau vivant. The new medium allowed it to fix and to distribute the formerly transient event on a time-based and spatial level. Although reducing it three-dimensionally onto the two-dimensional again, photography turns the living image back into a picture, framing it through the viewfinder and through the use of the light-sensitive material. Various links between the tableau vivant practice and early photography arise. For instance, the need for holding the poses for extended periods of time due to the low light sensitivity of the early material which was used. Within the spectrum of the tableau vivant practice, performative action might be minimized in a way that we must ask whether those examples still qualify as tableau vivants. A series of photographs showing Franz von Stuck's daughter Mary, modeled after Velázquez's dynastic portraits, challenges the categories. The Spanish painter Diego Rodríguez de Silva y Velázquez is famous for his representations of the infantas, such as Maria Teresa, whom he depicted at different ages. The royal full figure portraits were sent to different European courts in the context of marriage policy. Vanguards of the late 19th and early 20th century again highly appreciated Velázquez's skillful and virtuous painting technique. The painting which exists from Franz Stuck is labeled Mary Kindermaskenfest 1908, indicating that the Stucks had dressed up Mary for a children's carnival held at their villa in Munich. The painter thus attributes the picture to a documentary value derived from photography by the labeling. As revealed by the comparative method, the painting's most remarkable features are the full figure representation with the protagonist slightly diagonal. The costume, the crinoline dress, and the wig are customized. The clothing contributes to the pose by sculpting the body and shaping the posture. In the later version of Mary in the Velázquez costume, Mary appears between her father and her stepmother in the center. The family portrait presents Franz von Stuck as an artist seen from the back, holding his palette in his left hand before a white vast canvas. I have to look for While the couple is watching each other, Mary gazes at the viewer. Like Velázquez's portraits of the Infanta, Stuck's daughter Mary grows older from painting to painting. It remains unclear, though, what Stuck is about to paint, if it's Mary, who would be the motif here, or mother and daughter are. Moreover, the composition appears anachronistic regarding a working process as highly impacted by photography as shown before. However, it's a fact that Mary in the Velázquez costume had already gained its independence and existed as a painterly motif in several versions. As such, it had been introduced in Franz von Stuck's exploitation circuit. Stuck cooperated with the Munich-based publishing house Hanfstengel that marketed his paintings using the state-of-the-art reproduction techniques of the time. The shown catalog piece or page illustrates a selection of the Stuck reproductions available via Hanfstengel, and here we have our motif again. A photographic reproduction of the final painting also completes the album page. That also comprises a selection of the initial photo shooting that reveals the original image creation process, particularly regarding the model and photographer interaction. Stuck imitated none of those photos exactly. Instead, Stuck's painting synthesizes Velázquez's paintings regarding the dress and the pose, and a detailed enlargement of his daughter's face instead. And here I'm showing you again the detail from Mary's face, Stuck used as a model. To summarize that, photography therefore plays a significant role in the artistic production process, not only regarding creative invention, but also in terms of documenting, evaluating, and reproducing specific steps. I tried to illustrate this process on this slide. Between each artifact, there's a gap or an interval to take up Rebecca Schneider's thought from the beginning, an interval that allows acts of communication. Copying, imitating, and reproducing are ongoing practices within the visual arts. Photography and even film developed the idea of living images even further and explored the opposition of stillness and movement. Tableaux vivants affected popular culture and eventually made it into vaudeville programs. The plastic representations of Olga Desmond acting as a Greek sculpture, only wearing white body paint, oscillated between the claiming of aesthetic pleasure regarding the bourgeois canon, which then comprised classical art, and mere eroticism. Oscar Mester's silent film can be situated in the tradition, presenting nudes holding a pose on a revolving stage in this case. The titles, you can see, identify the poses recorded in the individual scenes, sometimes clearly referencing to specific artworks again. However, the polarity of the animate and the inanimate is prevalent to Western art theory and art production, prominently articulated in the Pygmalion myth. According to Ovidius, Pygmalion had sculpted a statue that eventually came alive, depicting an artistic creation as superior to nature. On the right, you can again see a painting from Stuck illustrating the scene. Visual culture studies have dealt intensely with the role of images in the last decades by introducing the concept of Bildakt, to translate as image act. Horst Bredekamp tried to emphasize the role of pictures to be more than their mere meaning. Derived from the speech act, Bredekamp's image act considers image reception as an active, performative process. Viewing at pictures therefore means acting with pictures. According to Bredekamp's terminology, the tableau vivant represents the first level of the image act, the level of imitation and animation expressed by performative appropriation, for instance. living image is still reflected in artistic practices. I will conclude my talk with some thoughts regarding the work of Eleanor Antin, who would use the tableau vivant to restage even photographic images. If we look at the early conceptual photography of Eleanor Antin, the artist's body has become the material. Carving a traditional sculpture piece from 1972, in which the artist documented her diet, refers to the idea of shaping the body, making it the working material. Performative, in this case, covers the process of fasting taking place over 1 month. By dealing with the concepts of normative aesthetics, namely the conventions of female beauty, the work can be situated in a tradition reaching back to workshop practices of the 19th century and beyond. We can compare it with templates produced for artists and artists' education, for example. Presenting one's body as a sculpture, again, refers to the Pygmalion myth and the idea of animating the inanimate. In Antin's case, the animate, so the artist's body, is frozen by photography and thus become inanimate. Although her gesture rejects any kind of pathos, and the placement of the body implements specific position, but in any case, the idea of the living image or living sculpture here still resonates. I want to end with Constructing Helen from 2007. We are looking into a workshop setting where people deal with statues. While the statues are naked, the workers wear white coats. And as seen in Olga Desmond's performances, white body paints turns humans into sculptures again. In this case, supported by digital image processing. The work is inspired by a photograph documenting the reconstruction of this Hellenistic polyfilm group. Here, Antin restages photographs by applying to photography's aesthetics, such as black and white. Helen, the central female figure, appearing in a traditional pose of the lying female nude, replaces the monumental Cyclops. She claims her place in the Odyssey by occupying her space as a giant sculpture. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maria. We'll now have Isabel Lynch from the University of Pennsylvania. I'll start to introduce Isabel. Isabel Lynch is a doctoral candidate in art history at the University of Pennsylvania, whose research examines how bodily pose played a decisive role in devising new ways of picturing movement that developed in cadence with emerging technologies of representation. She recently held an Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. She has worked as a curatorial assistant and educator at several museums and galleries, and she has curated exhibition screening programs and performance series for various galleries and film centers in Canada and United States. Isabel is currently a lecturer in the Department of Art Theory and Criticism at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Today, she is going to tell us about still performing Ada Isaacs-Menken, posing between stage performance and theatrical photography. Hi, Isabel.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone who played a part in organizing. It seems like it is a wonderful event. I'm really happy to be able to share some research with you today. I really wish that I could be there in Lisbon with you in this what seems like a very lovely pink museum of performance and dance, and seeing all of your papers and sharing wine and conversation. But yes, I'm speaking to you from Chicago, where it's currently 3 o'clock in the morning. So I will do my best, or 4, it's 4, it's 4 o'clock. So I will do my best to to make this cohesive. Although, yeah, I have to say, so I'm sharing some research that I initially took on for my dissertation. I'm not sure if it will still be part of the dissertation, but I'm sharing it with you in any case, and it's not written yet, so I'll be just talking from my notes at first for me. So this is, yeah, a different kind of performance than the one I'm used to. Okay. So all attempts to photograph me as Mazeppa have been failures. Now I want you to take me in 8 poses, exclaimed notorious actress, performer, and poet Ada Isaacs Menken upon entering theatrical photographer Napoleon Sarony's Birmingham studio in 1865. Posing against a studio backdrop and reclining on an animal pelt in a flesh-colored body stocking, Menken's photographic session was premised on the condition that she choreograph her own poses in an attempt to picture her legendary performance in the Broadway Theater's 1861 production of Mazeppa. Sarony, the photographer, granted Menken control of the photographic session, the control of her own poses, but only on certain terms. He wanted to take his own turn at posing Menken in an additional series of poses. Okay, and so photographer and model took turns choreographing poses, one after the other. So the American poet, performer, and posers Ada Isaacs Menken is often thought of as one of the first actresses in the United States to consciously control the production, reproduction, and circulation of her promotional imagery through performances that commingle self and stage character. And there are many biographies written about her, and many historians and biographers have emphasized the kind of constructedness of Menken's persona and stressing that Menken was an image, and that this image, the phenomenon known as Ada Isaacs Menken, was created for public consumption. And at very moments in time, over a century's worth of biographers have imagined her to be Jewish, Irish, Spanish, French, African American, and some biographies, some of which are self-authored, have surfaced, and her origins story are many, and they include having grown up in New Orleans as a child performer, having grown up as a coddled Franco-Spanish heiress, being a Jewish daughter in exile. There's many different versions of these stories, and as I said, some of them are self-authored and published as notes of her life in her own hand. This just another interesting fact, she was also quite often called up in seances during the spiritualism craze of the late 19th century as a ghost after her death. So she resurfaced again and again and again. So she's had multiple existences. So both on stage and off stage, Menken was known for her ability to strike a pose. Her acting, one English critic wrote, consists principally of attitudes. She poses better than she speaks. In a review of Menken's performance in Mazeppa, William Winter wrote that she moved around the stage assuming attitudes and poses without any idea of what acting is. And so much of the criticism around her performance characterizes it as all image, all surface, lacking the real depth of acting. In 1861, Menken took over the title role. Sorry, let me see here. Mencken took over the title role in the Broadway Theater's production of Lord Byron's Mazeppa, which and she took on, yes, so there was an equestrian scene in which the lead, which she played, was exiled into wilderness, stripped naked and tied to a charging steed. And so Mencken insisted on performing this stunt herself, and she wore a body stocking and a brief tunic and rode off stage on horseback. So this was a theatrical style of clothed nudity that became a staple of burlesque culture. And she sort of appeared as a blur to the audience because she moved so quickly. So I'm interested in thinking about Mencken's practice of posing on stage and in the photography studio as a processual practice and form of performance, and the poses as the sites of convergence of body and image. Okay. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna talk about this after. I'll talk about, okay, so the photographer Napoleon Sarny, who took the photographs that I showed you earlier, the carte de visite photographs, was a popular Broadway studio photographer working in the United States in the 1860s and 1970s. And he was well known for his ability to pose bodies in motion. So his photo studio, that, as you see here, was like a kind of theatrical space. He used illusionistic backdrops. He was known for his use of interesting poses and retouching. And he created what he termed living pictures that were sort of like some of the works that we were shown in Maria's presentation, kind of hover between photography and painting. He developed his own posing apparatus, which in a way liberated the people who posed for him, the models and actors who posed for him, to select and choose more dynamic poses. Okay, so yeah, so the photographs of Mencken were taken with a carte de visite camera, as you see here, and the carte de visite was developed in 1854 by photographer André Adolphe Eugène Disdéry, who patented the system for printing up to between 10 and 8 photographs on a single sheet, and these were cut up and mounted on cards, the carte de visite. So through the sliding plate holder and a camera with 4 lenses, 8 negatives could be taken by Disdéry's method on a single glass plate. And so every time the negative was printed, 8 prints could be seen. So, however, while the carte de visite camera and Disdéry's multiple exposure made multiple poses possible, it remained extremely difficult to pose a subject 8 times or more in the 10 to 20 minutes of a wet plate negative's viability. So a lot of the early examples of uncut carte de visite show very little movement or very little distinction between the poses. So, however, the posing apparatus developed by Sarny enabled more dynamic poses, and he became known for allowing actors to pose and more dynamically. Okay. So although the carte de visite was meant to be cut up and circulated in the pockets of audiences who showered her with gold, so they were cut up and owned by different people, I'm interested in thinking about the theatricality of the full uncut carte de visite and the ways in which we have a sense of action unfolding in time, or a narrative occurring. And in this image, a particular one that also took place on stage, the moment where Mencken is stripped and riding on horseback, tied to the horse, as you see here. Okay. So in a way, so it's something akin to a contact sheet. The carte de visite allows for a photographing of performance that has a sense of duration that you wouldn't have in a single photograph. And also due to the fact that Mencken and Sarony both took turns choreographing poses, there is a sort of doubling and a kind of repetition that is also inherent in her theatrical performances, where she would be performing night after night. Okay. And then finally, I'm also interested in thinking about the ways that Mencken's performance on stage was in and of itself photographic, the ways that there are records of accounts of the performances that describe the way light shone on her and the quickness and the speed of the horse traveling off stage, that she remained in the minds of audiences as a single image, as a singular image. Yes. Okay, I think I will stop there. I have more that I could share, but I feel like I'm quite tired and perhaps it's best to stop there. But thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Isabel. Thank you very much. I'll ask Maria to join me now. We still have time for some questions of these two amazing papers. We'll start. Any questions for Maria, for Isabel? Okay, Christopher, yeah. We can hear you very well. Thank you.
It's an interesting approach. We can basically reverse the conventional idea that we've already heard, that photography orientates itself towards painting, right? So kind of a video chronology is saying, no, actually, most of the scene the other way around. But my question refers actually to the concept of build up. And I was very surprised, almost surprised that, or at least your presentation made very clear, that the word actually has two meanings. The build up as referring to performativity, so on. But of course,
we're talking about entirely naked bodies, naked. Yeah. So the word in German for a nude is Akt. So you've got actually in the word Akt a double meaning. And I'm wondering, does Redekam actually play with that, or do you want to play with that? Because this is in this conference. This is a wonderful possibility to think.
Yeah.
I mean, we've basically been talking about the last 2 days, naked bodies, seeing them, naked bodies being banned by Facebook, and suddenly here we have not just nudes, but also a concept, which the word nude is actually built into the word of looking at how images do more than just generate meaning. Yeah. So this is my sort of invitation to you to wonder if one can think more with the Redekam concept.
Yes, I think, thank you for this remark. I think this would be worthwhile to think further. I think we could consider maybe the etymological roots of the word act, where it actually comes from, because I could imagine that acting somehow implements the German word act applied to depicting the nude body, which is also in artistic practice, which is also in between posing and it's a bodily challenging acting or act to perform a model pose for drawing or painting. And also we can draw lines again to tableau vivant practices from act postures or nude postures or posing as a nude, and to early photographic practices. And I think for your first remark, from the perspective of photographical history, the narrative of photography doubles painting somehow has been revised long ago. It's I think more common to general art history that we still stick to this paradigm somehow. Yeah, that was my answer. Thank you. And I also think the Bildakt theory of Redekam, that's also I can maybe step a bit further into that, because I think from the perspective of performance studies, I would be interested to dig deeper into his ideas, because I think maybe there's more potential in this first level of his Bildakt, which has actually 3 levels. So first is schematic Bildakt according to Redekam, which is sort of imitating pictures and acting like a picture. And the second is destructing pictures. And the last level is the most abstract level. It's on form.
Yeah, thank you. More questions?
I would have a question to Isabel, actually, because I would wonder, Isabel, you showed us this posing apparatus developed by Napoleon.
Yeah.
The photographer with this nice name, Napoleon. And what could you actually do with this photo? With this posing
Well,
developed?
So I have pictures, but they're somewhere else on my computer, and I think it's going to take me a while to find them. But I mean, of course, there were multiple posing apparatuses in the 19th century that were used by photographers and studio photographers. A lot of them involved like holding the head, but the one that he developed, what was special about it was that you could extend arms and legs. So he has this one photograph that became quite well known because it seemed like somebody was walking. And there's a book coming out this year by the photography historian Aaron Powles about him. So if you're interested, you can read more about what he developed. But yeah, so it involved more quicker possibility of movement, so that, for example, when the with the carte de visite camera, if you were taking for photographs rather than you could move slightly more than the usual. So yeah, that was what it was used for. And then there are records of people saying that really believed in the seeing movement in his images, much more so than Moorbridge, for example, because I think there was something more theatrical about it, that they could understand it as movement more so than yeah.
I think, thank you.
We still have time for more questions. Well, yeah.
Just as a comment, I think it's really interesting what you're saying, because if we look at the photographic learning that's taking place at that time, around the end of that century, we understand that blur means movement, and that's a very early thing in the theory of perception, but if we just start learning and then we work to the vignette as well as then transposed into the pictures of the painting, right? So I think that is really interesting, because the audiences are only starting with intermediate transference at that time. So I think it's really fascinating in both of these presentations to look at that, what the photographic what she does to our seeing of images.
Thank you.
You were able to hear it, Isabel?
Like faintly, just a little bit.
Yeah, for her it's difficult. It's very difficult to hear, but
so the comment was about that photography somehow modeled our perception reality, and mainly what I think interesting is that movement became blurred actually. And it's a nice or interesting paradox.
Yeah, I think, yeah, my sister is actually working on a project on the blur too, so we're constantly talking about this. But yeah, I think it's interesting that that people's perception of movement and the way people perceive movement change significantly. Yeah.
And I would have another question for Isabel.
Yeah.
So that is the example you showed. Did I understand correctly that we have an example here where it's kind of so the limits of the medium are also challenged, because normally we have those carte de visite, we put using just one posture and it's slightly different. But in your case, so the possibilities of the medium were challenged in that way that we can see really this transition from the still image to the moving image. Was this intentionally done? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, was it intentionally done? In a way, they were intended to be cut up and circulated as single images. So
okay, I see.
Yeah, so I don't think they were intended to be archived as full, the 8 frames that you see there. But just like we can still look at photographers' contact sheets, I think that it shows us something about the way the photographic session was understood. And I think for Mencken, she was thrilled with these photographs, much more so than any other photograph taking of her. I think precisely because there was something about them that was evocative of her stage performance.
Thank you.
I don't know if I've answered the question.
I think it's a good point that it's meant for cutting somehow. And
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. We'll have a break now. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Isabel. Have a good night's sleep.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Night's sleep. Thank you all. We'll have a break and we'll come back later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.